Welcome to our third video as we talk about what is to be our response to law enforcement as a Christian community. We've talked about prayer. We've talked about working our rights, making sure that we know our rights, that we then operate in a society that gives us the choice and the responsibility to interact, to make our voices known, that we will take those steps by voting and by engaging with law enforcement. Today, we're going to look at one of the most pivotal aspects of engaging with law enforcement, and that is conversation. But not just interaction, not just going and speaking, but we're talking about committed conversations. We're talking about committed conversations in contrast to casual conversations. You know, casual conversations is where we may talk, but I really have no reason to go beyond that first discussion. And if it seems like this discussion is going sideways, I have no reason to continue. I'm not committed to it. No, we're talking about a committed interaction that says I'm going to come back and I'm going to continue this discussion, even though we may not always agree. For many of us, we may think that for someone to say, I don't agree, ends the conversation. Oh, no, not at all. We're talking about the kind of conversation, as Ephesians 4 and verse 15 says, speaking love in truth, or speaking truth in love to one another. That means there is a standard and a position of interaction, and we have to be people who speak truth, not speaking truth in a hostile way, not speaking truth in a disruptive way, just to, again, vent our anger, but no, speaking truth that brings about loving relationships that can cause and bring about change and transformation in that which is not acceptable. So let me give you a quote by Dr. King. He puts it this way. He says, we will not remember the words of our enemy. We will remember the silence of our friends. And so if we view ourselves as right citizens, if we view ourselves as those who are responsible for our communities, then that means that we are to begin to have and continue to have interactions with those members of our community, which at times we may not trust. We must grow in a relationship of trust. We must grow in a relationship of back and forth interaction that brings about true change. So how does that take place? Well, I can relate to you that there are a few examples of that. I would say go to your police department. Go down in a time where you are not in trouble and you are not upset and there is not a lot of tension going on, and begin to establish communication, committed communication. That kind of communication that you're going to ask to speak with an officer or maybe someone who's in public relations, and you're going to say, you know, I would like to have someone who I can have an ongoing discussion with. I'd like to go out to lunch with them. I'd like to have them go out to lunch with me. I'd like to make sure that our interaction allows us to download back and forth just positions of how we think and who we are and how we approach life. I want them to know me as a human being. I want them to know me as their brother or their sister. And I want to know them in the same way, beyond the badge. I want to begin to have conversation. And we've seen that work in our own church as we've had the police department that's in our community come over to have lunch with us every year. The idea behind that is we want them to know that we exist. We want them to know that we're there. We want them to know that there is not a hostile relationship or desire for that kind of relationship. We want to have practical, constructive interaction. We want to love on them. We want them to know that we want to feed them. We want to encourage them. We want to make sure that they're taken care of and know that there is a group in their community that's praying for them. And that makes a huge difference, because that's called community policing by the law enforcement community. It's called community ministering by our community. We want to establish a relationship, and relationships that can be built on. So here now in our final video, we have covered all three: prayer, working your rights, and committed conversations. I pray that you will find one to begin with, which is always a good point to start in prayer, and then allow that to grow as you interact and you see change in your relationship with law enforcement and overall a change in law enforcement in general.